funny.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Four Elements United. I am Wind.
I'm Fire.
Earth.
And water.
You see, I didn't stop shooting that time. See there? Wasn't me.
And tonight we're going to continue the conversation that we've been in over the last couple of weeks about rewiring our brains, transforming our lives. And tonight we're going to talk about books which have deeply impacted our lives. We talked about rituals. We talked about prayer, I think. We talked about meditation. We talked about reading and studying. One of the things that all of us have done in our lives, in particular us, is read quite a bit and study quite a bit. Not necessarily in school, but outside of school to transform our lives. All of us are Black men that have lived in the city. Some of us have not had fathers in our lives, or have had two parents in the household, or we come from various backgrounds, having many obstacles, just by nature of being a young Black man, in the era that we grew up in, and even now, and even before then. Life is laden with all sorts of obstacles and pitfalls. And so tonight we're going to share some of the books that have supported us in our transformation, and having good lives, or striving to have good lives. So I'll start off and share this. I had three godmothers, two of which were devout Christians, one of which may have been an atheist, but she surely was angry at God. And when I was younger, I won't say a shorty today, but when I was younger, she committed suicide. And but I will tell you, these three women showed me so much love as a kid that when I think about it, I am absolutely blown away. One of my godmothers was a devout Baptist, and my other godmother was a devout Christian. I mean, a devout Catholic, pardon me. Both Christian. And like I said, the love that they showed me was absolutely astounding. I can't even begin to articulate the beauty of these women to you guys such that you would really get it. But the basis of that love that they shared to me, with me, was that Bible, was from that Bible. Now we, as Black people, we can have all sorts of criticism towards the Black church and towards Christianity. But I will tell you for sure that there is something of value in that book for each and everybody. And so the first book that I'm going to share with you guys is the Bible. This is my mother's Bible. She transitioned in 2021. And before she transitioned, she gave me this Bible and told me to hold on to it. When I was a kid, it always astounded me that people would take the Bible for face value or for granted and just listen to pastors, preach the word on Sundays and then sin on Monday through Saturday. And so I vowed when I was a kid never to be like that. I vowed to make sure that I wanted to know what the hell was in that Bible. That people around the world fought for land and property. I wanted to see what was in that Bible that caused the subjugation of our people. I wanted to see what was in that Bible that were the mysteries of life. And so I made a commitment to reading that Bible cover to cover. And like I said, despite what many people perceive about Christianity, there are some gems in that Bible that will leave you to be a better human being, a more loving human being, a more empathetic human being, a more forgiving human being, and a more wise human being. And I just park it right there. That's number one for me. Who wants to go next?
All right.
Well, go ahead, Fire.
Man, I got a bunch of books, so I've categorized these books based on how they show up for me. So I have 3 categories. The first category is consciousness. The second category is maleness, and the third category is leadership. For those of you who know, I operate as a leader in the corporate domain outside of my household, as a married man, as a father. Though leadership is inherent in those roles. And so let me start, and I'm going to go quick. So bear with me, get a pen and pad if you're interested. Let me start with consciousnness. I'm going to piggyback what my brother Wynn said, because the first book that I was introduced to is the same book that he was just describing, which is the Bible. Before I talk about, I'm not going to go into great detail in any of these books. I'm just going to tell you what I got from them categorically. So from the Bible to the Torah, to the Quran, to the Bhagavad Gita, to the Tao Te Ching, or Tao Te Ching, specifically the former books, I got a concept of how we got here, how we are to live while we are here, and what happens to us when we die. Now, as we move from the monotheistic religions to the Bhagavad Gita and the Tao Te Ching, those books to me were more focused on how do we behave while we're here? Who are we and how do we behave while we're here? Other books in the context of consciousness that were impactful, The Divine Matrix by Braden. I think Water put me on to that one. Water also put me on to. So if I'm stealing your thunder, Water, it's your fault because
you shouldn't, man. Like you're gonna go through 45 books, so you're gonna mention everybody's books. Like when mention one, and by the time that it gets around to the fourth person, you're gonna be like 75 minutes into the show.
Nah, I won't steal your thunder. So I'm not gonna mention any of the books that you put me on. What else? I'm gonna stop right there because every other book you and I have seen. You and I have talked about. I'm gonna stop.
Oh, it's
right
good.
There.
It's good. I got some. I know. I figured that we were gonna go through like a bunch of duplicates, so I picked some that I'm sure that nobody.
Outliers.
Probably my number one. You guys know what my number one is gonna be, but probably the other ones are gonna be things that you guys aren't gonna like. You guys wouldn't even mention.
So I'll go quick then on that note. So Divine Matrix, Great Braden, Cybernetics. Look that one up. That one was deep. The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho. Four Agreements, the Don Miguel Ruiz, A New Earth, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. I think that's either Eckhart or
no, that's Eckhart. Yeah.
That's Eckhart. All right. So for maleness, Knowing the Purpose and Power of Men by rest in peace, Dr. Miles Monroe out of the Bahamas. Man, that book was good. If you're a brother struggling with your why, definitely check that one out. Last but not least, From Consciousness is Flowing with Universal Laws and Principles by Margot Kurdiker. Dr. Margot Kurdiker. Lord have mercy. That thing rocked me. That rocked me all the way off my Christianity. I'm not going to lie to you. That led me to the other Eastern philosophies. Leadership-wise, Jesus CEO, Extreme Ownership by the SEALs, Leif Babin and Jocko Willink. Begin with Why by the famous, what's the guy's name? Simon Sinek. And then Life in General. I'm going to pause there and turn it over to Water to talk about his outliers because I think he's got some good stuff here. I'm taking notes, Water.
Nah, man. Earth was going to speak after you. Go ahead, Earth, buddy.
Go Earth.
Oh, you could have gone ahead. I'm cool as the other side of the pillow, but
I'm not in a rush. Like,
okay.
Yeah.
So for me, like the books that really stand out to me are books that I could see myself in the book. If I can't see myself in the book, I've read a lot of phenomenal books, but I couldn't see myself in the book or in whatever the subject matter was. So the first book that I recommend, it's a short read. It is a phenomenal book. It's titled The Spirit of Intimacy. That is the first book. It is phenomenal. It's only like 200 pages, a little less than 200 pages roughly. It's a phenomenal book. And the book is actually centered around looking at relationships from a traditional African perspective. When you read that book, when I read that book, I literally saw myself in the book. And it made sense. It made way more sense than any other book about any type of relationship, whatever. And the interesting thing is, and Court probably has no clue about this. She turned me on to the book. I don't even know if she's read the book. But turned me on to the book probably about 10 years ago, roughly. And she posted a quote from the book. And it's about what's called a hearing. And from a traditional African perspective, a hearing is when a woman is pregnant and the elders go to the woman to find out who is this child that's coming. What is the purpose of this child? And what can be done to facilitate the fulfillment of the purpose of that child's purpose. When I read that quote from the book, I immediately bought the book, and it's one of the best reads, period. Because it's very simple, it's to the point, and it gives you a totally different way of looking at relationships. But we only look at relationships from one direction. That's love. And so I say one more thing and I move on. One of the things that stood out for me in the book was how we view love in the West. We start from that point. And so once you start from the pinnacle There's nowhere else but down. And from a traditional perspective, it doesn't start there. I mean, romantic love. You build to that, and it makes a complete difference in how those relationships work. And so sometimes we'll look at relationships, and I've heard people say, oh, people in other countries are forced to be in these relationships, blah blah blah. But and they've never studied the philosophy behind the relationship dynamic of other cultures. Never studied it at all, and they just make assumptions. But that was the most profound thing in the book for me. One of them. Okay. So that book. Secondly, and the author of the book is Sobonfu Some, who's the author of the book. It's a phenomenal book. I definitely recommend reading that. Short read. Should take you a couple of days and you're done. And every time I've read the book multiple times. Every time I read the book, it's something new that I missed out of the book. That's how profound it is. Anyway, the next book, it would be Of Water in the Spirit by the late Elder Malidoma Some. That book began to give me a peek into who I am. That book spoke to me like no other book has spoke to me at all. And it's his autobiography. It's what it is. It is hands down 1 and 2. I just named 1 and 2 for me, period. And I can read those books over and over and over again and never get tired of reading them at all. And it gives you a different perspective of life. And so in that book, one of the most profound things, and what I'm going to say is not going to give away the book by no stretch of the imagination. So I'm not going to say why, but he left the village at the age of 6. I think he's 6 years old. Returned at 18. He was staying with some Jesuits. When he returned to the village, there was a huge argument between the elders as to whether or not to initiate him because he missed his initiation, which should have taken place when he was 13 or 14. And guess what? Guess why there was a debate? Because he was deemed as being illiterate. Even though he could read, write, math, arithmetic, whatever. He could do all those things. And he knew the Bible like the back of his hand. But he was still deemed as being illiterate because he didn't know spirit. Mm-hmm. And so that was the great debate. And so, anyway, I'm not going to give if I say any more, I may give it away. But that part of the book was just blew my mind because I never thought about it. Because what we view in the West as being illiterate is someone who cannot read, write, and do basic math. And so when you look at it from someone else's view of illiteracy, it begins to untangle your mind. And so for me, it began to untangle some things for me. It started to give me a totally different view and perspective on literacy, period. Because I have an elder who can't read. He is hands down, he has more knowledge in his pinky than I would say everybody in North America put together, period. Because he has the ability to do things and he's just on a whole nother level, period. He's not the only one. I've met other elders in a similar situation. So we would consider him as being illiterate. But the level of knowledge that he has on being human, the knowledge he has on spirit, just the knowledge he has on this basic life surpasses, I promise you, any book of philosophy, something you've read, it surpasses that, period. Okay, so that's book number 2. 3, this is like one of my second favorite books, a book called Urugu by Dr. Marimba Ani. And this is the first and only time that there was a book that actually did a critique on European thought and culture coming from a traditional African perspective. And so it's looking at European culture from a spiritual perspective. In that book, phenomenal. It's a little longer read, but it's still a phenomenal book. When you start reading the book, like I couldn't put it down at all. Because we only get one view of the world. And that's from a westernized, from a European perspective. That's the view we get. But to see from someone else's view, just out of their culture, is mind-blowing. And it goes against everything that you know and you think you know, period, from that perspective. And since I've been practicing within my tradition, the book means a lot more to me now. Because when I read it, I wasn't practicing. I was just, an infant, a little grasshopper. Like probably not even a grasshopper at that point. But it gives me a totally different perspective because I can see and I know exactly what the book is talking about. So those are I only have 3. So those are my 3. That's it. What you got, Water?
Wow. So if this is your first or second time watching the show, you can just tell that these guys love the sound of their voices. I mean, Here we are 22 minutes into the show, and we're finally getting around to the 4th dude asking them about his one book. Wynn did one book, so I thought we were going to do one book each. These guys are like, oh, my God, they got a long, you know how like you roll the scroll out and this, the scroll rolls on the ground and it starts rolling that way. Oh, and then there's this book. Oh, man, and then I like this book. Oh, man, dude. I got a whole bookshelf, like... And I'm talking specifically to fire. And so you got Earth started. Earth like, oh yeah, let me just roll through all my. Anyway, because I have to do this, So anybody who's seen it, I'm the jokester of the show, and I'm sorry, like these guys put me to sleep, and I keep telling them they put me to sleep. If they put me to sleep, I feel for you guys because you got to deal with listen. You like, man, these guys, they just keep going on. So if you see me nod off, just what's going on. So I'm gonna be quick though because I want to give one book, and then I think Wendy and I we're gonna go through our books because these two guys over here, they basically have gone through the whole bibliography that's in the whole English language or whatever. So my one book. Fire did mention it. For me, Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle is probably, these guys know Eckhart Tolle is my dude. And that to me was before that book, I used to be the guy who just scatterbrained, like always. And I could not just sit still. Just being quiet and still just really, it was uncomfortable to me. And it wasn't until I just heard this dude explaining it, read his book, then I just started listening to the audiobook over and over and over again until it just really like soaked into my brain what it meant to be in the moment. And for me, that's how I was able to shake all of my, it's almost like coming of age, like to shake that youthful, have to always be like stimulated on my phone. These guys know they hate me because I never have my ringer on my phone. Like I never have notifications on, no vibration, no sounds or whatever ever, like not just when I'm sleep or working, but just ever. Like to me, I just have to be in that Zen state. And if I get out of it, it's fine, but that to me, Power of Now, just going through that, if there's one book that I could recommend to people, and I had to just say one book, that would be it for me. Win. That's how you do it quick, though. Win.
Nice. So one of the things
that's not what she said. That's not what she said. Okay.
But
so one of the things I want you guys to be present to is that we didn't just arrive just now. So I wanted to go back in the day, and kind of record some of the things that had an influence on us since we were kids. so that the people, so that the kids, the babies that hear us, they can go to those books. And so some of the mothers that are listening to us, some of the fathers that are listening to us can share with the kids, you know, some of the books that have influenced us. And so one of those books when I was a kid, my mother gave me, she exposed me to, because she loved me so, that made a big difference in my life, was a book by the name of Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys by Jawanza Kunjufu. My mother loved me, man. And she wanted to make sure that I had every advantage to me. She wanted me to be clear about what the obstacles were for me as a Black young man, so that I wouldn't fall into the trap. And that book was absolutely astounding to me, because I had no idea of what I was actually experiencing. Jawanza articulated what I was experiencing as a young Black man, and it allowed me to navigate and circumvent some issues, and had me to be the man that I am today. And for that, I will always be grateful.
Is that a pass? Is that a mic? Is that a baton pass?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I blew my load on all my books, so I can just basically check out of the show right now.
Bro, we know you got 20 more. Come on.
Well, even if you don't have any more books, can you get them more granular on the impact and what you got?
Honestly, as I'm listening to you, I can't think of a more impactful book in my youth than the Bible. So I'll do two things. I will share with you real quick how I came to know Christianity at the time of what was happening circumstantially. And then number two, I'm going to tell you about an event that actually had a greater impact. And I didn't even know this. It wasn't even in my peripheral until Wynn just said what he said, until like right now at 40 years old. So number one, my mom worked a lot, and she also loved her some bingo. So we had a lot of babysitters. And one day over at babysitter's house, we stumbled upon a VHS tape with a documentary by the name of Faces of Death. Faces of Death was not a documentary for a 5-year-old, okay? I don't know if any of you stumbled upon Faces of Death in your youth, but it's not PG-13 at all. Scared me to death of death. Like the stuff that Faces of Death was showing you live and in color was unfathomable in 1986. All right. So I have a fear of death at 5. Around the same time, my dad had to go sit down for a while. I won't get into the details. When I say sit down, I mean he had to go do a little time. And I remember he told me after a weekend with my brother and I that he would not be coming to get us next weekend or the weekend after. He had to go sit down for 8 weeks. And in my mind, I was like, man, that's an eternity. So long story short, a few days after that, you take a fear of death, you take a father who's leaving, and you combine that with a, 80-year-old white man. He's like 126 now, named Pat Robertson on the 700 Club. I walk into the house from school, latchkey kid, mom's at work, brother's in tow. He says, if you want a father that'll never leave you nor forsake you, and you want to have life everlasting, put your hand on the screen and repeat after me. Say no more, Mr. White Man. Say no more. I don't want to die And I don't want a dad who's going to leave me nor forsake me, considering the circumstances. And that's when I gave my life to Christ. But the thing that I think, based off of what Wynn just shared, that popped up for me was second grade. I went out for the play. Now I was bullied. I was shy, dark-skinned, buck-toothed, bummy. Again, society's reject, the hood's reject, because I was smart. I spoke like them. I was a nerd. And so I was not accepted in my community in the projects at all. But some told me to go out for this play. My mother encouraged me to go out for this play. In this play, I played an African prince. My father was the chief of a village in Timbuktu. I forgot my name, but I had to wear the dashiki. I had the little cap. In that moment, for the first time in my little 6 or 7 years, I felt alive. I felt like I was seen. I felt like I had purpose. I had a command of my lines. I studied and practiced some things ritualistically, and I delivered with an accent and everything at 5, 6. I was probably 6 or 7 years old. And I remember I would say my name and I would say, my father, welcome to Timbuktu. My father is the chief of this village. And any of you who know your history, you know how important and significant Timbuktu is to Africa and the diaspora. I think being able to play an African prince at such a young age gave me a sense of nobility. It gave me a sense of empowerment, that no matter what those guys in the hood was teasing me about and beating on me about, it was just once I experienced it, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unexperience it. I am somebody. And I think that that's in me even to this day. I don't care what room I go into. And so it's not a book per se, but that experience for me, being able to play African prince at such a young age and wear the garb, that did something to my soul that none of the books that I mentioned earlier has done or has cost for me. And I can see the rest of my time to earth.
Nice. So is it just one book that we're going to talk about?
The most influential? Is it the most influential one? And are you
as a shorty?
As a young king.
As a shorty.
as that. Yeah. No, but for me it was Encyclopedia Britannica. I read every single volume when I was a kid, probably starting at maybe the age of 8, maybe.
That would make sense.
I read every single volume over 20 times. I was fascinated. I mean, it was to a point where if you ask a question, I said, "Oh, it's in this volume, it's in W, whatever volume that is," and I could tell you about where it was. That's how much I read those books, and it's such an influence. Those books just opened up the world in my imagination, reading those volumes. And so for me, Seawater is short and sweet. So that's the book for me, or the volume of books for me. I just read them over and over and over and over and over again. So that's me. What you got, Water?
Easy, yeah. So I have a real, I guess, confession. I didn't really get into books until after college. I hated reading before then. I used to read comic books, and I used to read those little books where you flip. You make a decision, and then if you want X to happen, then you go to page 75, and if you want them to walk through the door, you go to page 28. So I used to read those, but outside of that, I didn't read books. But my 20s was kind of like literally right after college was when I started really getting into books. And then I'd say 22, I just started like consuming books. And for me, so if we're talking about when we're shorty, that would I'd say 22 is designating me as being a shorty. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was probably at that time the most impactful book for me to just help me understand literally that I had to be a different person than I am now. And so it was a weird concept because, you know, you have the different habits, and habit number 7 is like always sharpen your saw. So for me, that just got into, I always have to work on myself. And that's really the takeaway that I got from the book. I think, you know, habit number 2 is begin with the end in mind. That one was impactful for me too. But I'd say always sharpening your saw for me is probably the biggest takeaway I took from that book. And that's the reason I'm on this show with these guys. You know, I mean, we're all 4 busy guys, and at the end of the day, I mean, you know, we have to make it work to do an hour. And that's why I'm always like, it's an hour, guys. But we always have to make it work. But I think that part of the reason that motivates me to continue to even have these 3 guys into my life is because we all 4 are about sharpening our saw. So since I was 22 and started really devouring books, like just, you know, having this voracious appetite for books, sharpening my saw has been a big part of my life. And so I'd say that you talk about when the mothers and the fathers and the young kids or whatever, like pick that book up. And if it's boring you, you know, just get the notes, but get to the 7th habit. And that habit is going to basically be the fundamental habit that you want to take into your life from when you get it till the time that you check out of here and they throw dirt on your toe. That's what I got.
So, like in the 80s, you know, talk shows were real big. You know, you had Oprah Winfrey and you had
Arsenio, boy.
Arsenio. Well,
you know. Boy, everybody remembers Arsenio.
I wasn't ready for that.
You remember the crowd? Boy, he used to have the crowd hype when he came out. Okay, go ahead.
But one of my favorite guys was Phil Donahue. And Phil Donahue one day had an interview with this black man. And I had never heard a black man speak like this in my life. And this black man happened to be a PhD from Northwestern University by the name of Dennis Kimbrough. And Dennis Kimbrough wrote this book called What Makes the Great Great. And in this book, he interviewed and described the geniuses in the black community that had succeeded against all odds. And it broadened my horizon to what was possible and what perseverance looks like. And when I read that book, I was so impressed that it had me look into his other books. And that's when I found out that he wrote Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. And when I read that, I was absolutely blown away. And it had me, so I don't know if anybody knows this, but Dennis Kimbrough was a student of W. Clement Stone, who was a student of Napoleon Hill. And Napoleon Hill wrote the original Think and Grow Rich. And that's how I got exposed to that book, which is considered the business Bible of the world. And when I read that book, I was blown away, so blown away that I took money out of my pocket and went to a physical bookstore and bought a case of the books and gave it to my best of friends. Think and Grow Rich, What Makes the Great Great, extraordinary books. You got to have it in your library. You got to read it. I'll park it there.
You muted, Fire.
You just gonna park it right there and not give us a segue to a question or something? No?
You got something else? Like teenage years? 18, 19, 20, 25? Winnie the Pooh?
Dr. Seuss? Nah, nothing else transformative that I didn't already share.
He blew your load.
I told you.
Format. This guy shot one shot. You shot like
Well,
a magazine unloaded.
Let me lay it up for you. Share with the people Cybernetics.
So Cybernetics is a deep dive into neuroscience and deals with what they call the automatic success mechanism. And it proposes that every human being is equipped or hardwired with an automatic success mechanism. And inside of reading that book, I also saw for myself that there is a propensity or a pull to self-sabotage. And what I got present to was the distinction choice, or to allow myself to self-sabotage. I also got present to the circumstances by which, in the narrative by which I condition my mind to allow myself to screw it all up royally. And the flip side of that was how easy it is, or how easy it could be for me to choose a different way of perceiving everything that happens. And in so doing, I think Jay-Z said it best. He said, I cannot lose because even in defeat, it's a valuable lesson learned, so it evens it up for me. And so out of that book, I begin to become, instead of somebody who victimizes themselves based on circumstances, Cybernetics begin to frame and created a space for me to become a chief/master problem solver. So I see problems as opportunities as opposed to barriers and hurdles and objections and things that would have me stopped. And that has been transformative in my life. Now, do I get tired of solving problems? Yes, I do get tired of solving problems. But my own problems, instead of beating myself up, which is what I used to do, I used to crucify myself whenever I made a bad, or I won't say bad because we don't live in that domain, but made a choice that led to circumstances that were less than ideal. And what I come to realize is that there's no such thing, because even those circumstances that are less than ideal lead me to a place of enlightenment, or lead me to the place where I'm supposed to be. I don't have to finagle my life. I don't have to finesse. I don't have to strain. I don't have to resist what is so. I can control the controllables, influence the influenceables, and leave everything else to the universe and be okay with that. So Cybernetics is going to be not a feely, fluffy book. It's going to be rooted in science. So if you pick that one up, expect some scientific backing to the whole neuroscience space and the psychological space. Anything to add to that, Water?
It's Earth go. Roll with it, Earth.
Oh man, this is funny. I'm laughing. I looked at the time, and I'm like, it's after 1 a.m. So I'm thinking
both of you guys blew your loads. Look. Hey, look, if you see Fire doing something, Earth, just don't do it. Like this guy. Let this guy leave this guy on his own next time, Just
I should have set some ground rules, but I expected Fire to.
Right.
Well, it is. You're the host, though, Win. So, and honestly, all honesty, this is poor leadership for the show. Not Fire. I got to bail Fire out on this one. This is poor leadership.
Had I had the outline, had I had the agenda before the meeting, I would have followed the script. But I didn't know where he was going.
Or you could have just cut him off. Like, nah, bro, you get one. Like, don't come up with that list, and then boom. So it's poor leadership, man.
I was wondering.
This is a leadership. This is an opportunity, though, man, for you to grow right here, bro.
Oh, man.
Just take that coaching. Take the coaching, Lynn.
Man, you got to take the coach. Are you coachable? Is the real question.
Well,
can't always be right, bro.
The coaching is never do that again.
Man, I'm gonna blow my load left to my own devices. You got to give me some guardrails.
I mean, you're supposed to. You already know you're supposed to go an hour, not 5 seconds, bro.
Yeah. You. Fire. You went out of bounds, but it's all good. Earth, I can bail you out, man. If you want me to, I can give you a minute to think or whatever, bro. I got.
Yeah. Go ahead and bail me out. Appreciate
it. Okay, cool. So this, I held my shots in my clips. So my holster, I kept it holstered. So look, another one, probably early 20s. And this is a classic. Wind is a big fan of Think and Grow Rich. He knows I'm a big fan of that too, And so it's a financial gem. But I got another financial gem that a lot of people sleep on, which is Rich Dad Poor Dad. I mean, listen, this book is written. It's written as if it's a kid's. It starts out kind of like as a kid's story, if you will. But I mean, dude, there's some meat on the bone. I mean, some serious meat on the bone, to the point of where he basically outlines a personal financial model that people can live by throughout their lives, so that they actually can exit what he considers the rat race. Okay. So the rat race is what Fire was talking about when he was like, I'm a leader at a, corporate or whatever. That's the rat race. And, what Rich Dad Poor Dad, the whole premise of the book is it's about getting out of the rat race. And so he frames it up by, talking about his two dads. He had one dad that was rich, one dad that was poor. And one of the dads was his friend's dad, who he had the exposure to when he was a young kid. And his friend's dad, they went to his friend's dad, which was his rich dad, and they said, hey, can you teach us about money? And all the things that he had learned about money was from his poor dad, which was his actual biological dad. And his biological dad, always said things like, we can't afford that. But he would always, in the book, he would say that his rich dad would actually say the opposite, which is, how can I afford that? And he was saying that by asking a question instead of making that statement, you actually stimulate your mind to go and try to, not even go and try. You actually stimulate your mind to go figure out how you can afford it. And so I'm a huge fan of, Think and Grow Rich. That's a little bit more cerebral. It's longer. It's a tougher read. If someone wants an easier read, and you want something that's like an actual personal financial model, then Rich Dad Poor Dad is that's the ticket. Classic.
Nice.
Cool. Now,
go ahead, Earth. There you go. See, I got him queued up. There you go.
So I was thinking about a book that was extremely influential for me, and it's The Mastery of Love by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Ooh.
That book, I've read that book over 30 times, at least.
Yes.
And every time I read it, it's something different. Because, I'm in a different place in my life. So I go back and read it, and I'm like, you get it from a logical perspective when you read it initially. And then I read the second time, and I could see myself in the book. And then the third time, I saw more of myself. Fourth time, I saw more of myself. So it gives you this phenomenal perspective on love, in that it has you to really understand that. No. It had me question whether or not I'd actually love someone. Really, had me really began to analyze that. And after reading the book, I had to say no, absolutely not. And it was a hard pill to swallow. I'll be honest about that. But I had to come to the realization that nah, I didn't, because it was all in language. It wasn't in like actions at all. So I don't want to give too much of the book away. It's a short read, or you could get the audio book. The audio's relatively short also, but it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal book, phenomenal read, and it will have you question yourself. It'll have you question who gave you love, who defined that for you. Are you the author of love, or is someone else the author of love, and you just kind of going along with whatever they say that love is? Which means that it had me question whether or not I was authentic in relationships, authentic in love. And I, no, absolutely not. Did I hold myself prisoner in relationships? Did I hold the other person prisoner in a relationship? But it would look, when you get that piece, it doesn't look like force. It's very subtle things. Are you treating the person who you're with like they're an adult? Are you really treating them like a child? Within, does your ability to have a high degree of empathy or sympathy cause you not to love the person, and you think you are? So it had me to question all of those things. And so it just gave me a totally different perspective. And I took what I needed from the book, and I actually apply a lot of those things, those principles. The ones that really apply to me, I apply a lot of those principles to my relationships now. Because you have to let people be an adult. Because we all have been domesticated. That's the word that's used in the book. I actually like that word. We all have been domesticated to behave a certain way, just like cattle, just like dogs or whatever. And so we just pretty much go along with, whatever someone says love is. You love someone if ... And the ... really does not have anything to do with love, because that can be applied to anyone, period, outside of your significant other. But how does it look, with your significant other? How does that look? And so I would highly, 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 highly recommend that book. Highly recommend it. And I've bought that book for so many people, and I've given away my copy, and I just went out and bought another copy of the book. It was just that impactful. So if you want to read a book on relationships, that's the one to read, definitely. But read it from the perspective of I know nothing. So you have to read it from that space, because you may think that, oh, I know this, but you have to read all of that. Oh, well, maybe I don't know this, because knowing something will have you not comprehend the message that's being that they're trying to get across to you, because you know it, and so you'll miss the message knowing it. So you have to read it from the space of I know nothing, just like from Game of Thrones. You know nothing, Jon Snow. It's no different. You know nothing. read it from that space. So yeah, appreciate you giving me the space, water. I was thinking like, man, that has to be another book. But yeah, appreciate that. But that's all I got.
I heard that Game of Thrones reference. Valor Morghulis, my friend. When?
In the spirit of transformation, personal transformation, one of the best books that I have ever read, one of the best stories that I have ever read was the Autobiography of Malcolm X. This man transformed himself from a street hustler to going to prison, to being illiterate, to being one of the most literate human beings that the world has ever known. The most articulate man that the world has ever known. It's a wonderful story, and it's an inspiration for all Black children, especially, to show perseverance, that anything is possible, that hard work and dedication, work ethic, and honor, how it all can be wrapped up to make something beautiful. I highly encourage people to read the Autobiography of Malcolm X. It's a beautiful story. And as a consequence of reading that book, I share with you another book. The Holy Quran. This, along with the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao, the Jewish Bible, and other religious texts, sent me on a spiritual journey to understand the world religions, world culture, world history, and has made me a better human being, a very well-rounded human being. There's a tremendous amount of principles that are in those books that are enduring. And I highly encourage people, as opposed to reading a couple of pieces of these texts, to really be committed to reading the entire text and learning other people's cultures, other people's histories. And I promise you, what you'll find at the end is that it's all the same. And the intent of all these books is for us to love one another and respect and honor one another. And so, in the spirit of time, Water, take us home and talk about what's going to happen next week.
Well, I can tell you what's going to happen next week, folks. If you want to come to a show where there won't be a lot of soliloquies like this show, then come next week. Because next week, I got to tell you, like, I will be cutting you guys off. All this long yip yap fire, buddy. I know you love yourself. Okay. I know you bringing sexy back. Okay. But bro, we cutting people off next week. And we're going to have a good show. You know, we're going to have a fun show. What I want to do is I want to chop it up though next week. We're going to basically be rapid firing so that we can actually have more of a conversation as opposed to, you know, 4 people, you know, sharing their own monologues. But next week we're gonna the topic will be, what habits do you have to change? I really want to get into that. I think that is for me, like I said, man, sharpening the saw has been I would not be here right now on this show with these guys had I not sharpened my saw. Like, the old me was not interested, just wasn't like, man, what, talk about books, you know? So I think that what habits do we have to change is really something important. And I want to cue up the elements, bring your habits that you have had to change. But more so, I want to get into the habits that you have to change now. Like, what is it that you have to change in order for you to get yourself to where you want to go? Because I think that's going to be one of the most, the best takeaways for the audience, is that if they can actually put themselves in our shoes and say, you know what, wow, I resonate with that habit that Earth says that he has to change, or that Wind says he has to change. So tune in next week. It'll be a great show. And as always, Wednesday at 8 p.m. See you next week.
Peace.
Peace, everybody.